Hello, welcome to this week's video on My Hero Academia. This week I'm reviewing Volume 2 of Vigilantes. You know the rules and so do I. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below and you will be ready in next week's show. Once you're there, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today. It will do them a power of good as we draw closer and closer to breaking 100 subscribers. Ooh, will be wonderful to do that by the end of the year. Now, just a quick note before we get too far into the review. I will be blunt with you, dear listener. I'm not feeling well at the moment. I've not felt good for the past few days or so. So forgive me if I don't sound my usual bouncy self today, because it is one of those horrible days I'm just going through. So there's a good chance I've recorded this in shifts. So forgive me if stuff sounds a little bit odd as we go through it. With that said done, let's get into the review itself. And we start out, as we often do at the start of our reviews, by talking about the positives. And you know what? Let's just get into the headlines, as they've now become known as. This has been a largely fun volume, with some episodes that have really given us a great insight into the backgrounds and true character of our cast, as well as developing those characters further. Some of them I still feel need time to grow and develop, but that is a point that will trick us as the review itself goes on. It adds a layer of relatability to some and edge to others, all whilst providing us with a frequent collection of great action sequences, and possibly features one of my most favourite action sequences in the entire series thus far, and I'm including the main series as part of that. Ooh, praise indeed. Now, I'm going to start out talking about the action, as, to be honest, I really don't know what I can say about it, because, well, let me put it this way. It's not that the action in this particular volume isn't good, but because I feel it is the lesser element of it. Again, not because it is bad, because there's quite frankly some brilliant stuff in it. It's just more a simple fact of that I can't just, well, there's only so many ways that you could say, well, that looked cool, or that was thrilling, or that was badass. You know, because a lot of the action that we had has been like that. Just that, you know, you can't really commit to that in a review. But what we'll still say is that the action sequences we do get in this particular volume are oftentimes very well constructive, offering a great sense of weight and momentum to the fights and the impacts of those fights when you end up seeing them. As is the case with any kind of action sequence, you want it to feel real, even if, let's be honest, it isn't. You want there to be a weight and a heft between every strike and every blow, to make it seem as painful and agonizing as possible, to really make it seem like a true battle between two people. It's why I often feel that the fight sequences in the original Dragon Ball are better than what we've seen in Dragon Ball Super and GT, and regrettably a large section of Z. In this particular series, in this particular volume, you can see the wind upon the punches. You can see the reactions to those punches, particularly when we have the fight between Stendalh and Knuckle Duster, where you just see all the momentum just smashing from between the two of them. And that I just really love. I just love how there is this genuine sense of weight and heft between the action in all of this. And it's something that, when I look at other anime, it feels like it is lacking. I know this is a manga, but you get the idea. When I look at modern Dragon Ball, they're just flitting all over the place. In original Dragon Ball, you watch a fight between Goku and Tien back when they're having the big fight in the tournament, that you can they are kicking the shit out of each other and then some. Something that you don't get in the modern run of it, and is something that thankfully we do get here in Vigilantes. In Vigilantes, again, you can see that wind up to the punch. You can see when he strikes Stain. You really get a sense of just how the momentum behind Stain just broke against him like a wave crashing into a rock, and stuff like that really ends up selling all of it. There is a weight behind all the action that we see. Even Stendhal's little fight with the knockoff Avengers I think is fantastic, and as I've said in the past, I quite honestly think that that whole sequence, how it is shot, how it is put together, is possibly my most favourite one in the entire series, including My Hero Academia itself. Because of just how it is put together. This is a quick, tight and claustrophobic fight, and it is drawn in a tight, quick and claustrophobic way. All the panels are small and tight to really convey just how confined everything is. And to just easily convey the speed of it all, they're very small panels. You see small, quick panels, these short reaction shots, and it's almost as easy as it begins. It's a great measure to show you just how capable Stendalh is as a fighter, really setting the stage for them as to how powerful they truly are, how skilled they are, and what a great threat they're going to end up being for our heroes when they end up eventually fighting them. Sure, I will admit that when it came to actually doing my review, I was still kind of a little bit flippant about the whole Stendalh thing, but still, that doesn't take away from just how great of an action sequence that particularly is. Even just on a sheer spectacle point of view, it is really great. And again, it's probably one of my most favourite ones we've seen thus far, because it really uses the medium perfectly. I really don't know how you would do this in any other format. I don't know how you do this in an anime, because you have a far greater canvas to work with there. I can see in my head how you could do that, but it's in a stylized nature that My Hero Academia doesn't really go for, but hey, I'll leave that for far more learned and intellectually capable people than myself, certainly right about now, given how I'm currently feeling. As has been mentioned many times in the past in my reviews and in this particular review itself, I have really loved these great looks into the history and backstory of some of our characters. I will grant you though, I do feel that at times more could have been done. Maybe it is a simple case of I'm enjoying it so much I want to see a little bit more of it, you know, like give me an extra page of this, give me an extra couple pages of this. This is great, this is brilliant. But what we do end up getting is still fantastically presented, with some sequences in it just being brilliant. I know that I kind of do bitch and moan about the debate between show versus tell, but in this one, they just somehow they get around some of this stuff in just such a short period of time is great. Like when we're learning about the backstory of Shoga, where we learn how he became a petty criminal. We get that nightmare vision of all those flashbacks just swirling around his head as he just comes to this snapping moment. And that itself, whilst I have said I do feel that the imagery there needed to be a little more grotesque and distorted and just really sell just this twisted state he finds himself feeling in, it's still brilliant for what it is. It conveys everything that you need to know about this guy in just one page. Yeah, as I said in my review a couple episodes ago, I'd love it if it was a double page spread, but still, what we get in that in that rather large panel is still great, and I really want to just see how it could be blown up into something bigger. Learning about the prior connection between Popstep and Crawler was great, and Popstep's mental journey, her anguish during the episode of how she wants to tell Crawler about them having met before, and how she has his old hoodie and that little kid that he's been talking about. Oh, I hope they grow up to be a great hero one day. Yeah, sure, I might not make it as a hero, but so long as that person has a great life, I'm happy for them. And then the anguish that whole thing, that whole inadvertent guilt trip that he's put on Popstep is just great. And that image that you get towards the end of the episode, the one that I used as part of the thumbnail, or at least my crappy interpretation of it, I just think is brilliant. It just says so much. And it also, you could argue that he just says something about the nature of superhero culture within that society. You know, both the characters are leaning quite heavily on All Might, and All Might being such an inspirational figure, they just want him to be around them. He is their comfort item. He's what makes them and society as a whole feel safe. And that's what she ends up retreating to. And of course, learning about Crawler always having been this Mr. Nice Guy is fantastic. Whilst I will admit that back when I was discussing episodes, and even now I do feel that his nice guyness is a little bit overplayed to almost a kind of infuriating level. Just seeing that he's always just being the genuinely sweet guy that wants to help people is great. He really is your friendly neighbourhood superhero. Oh sure, he probably isn't going to be the one that's punching Thanos or whatever the name is in the face and saving the day with Infinity Gems or whatever, but he is going to be the guy that's going to help you when you most need it, whether that is because you've had your wallet stolen or because you need help getting some groceries into your house. You know, it's a really great character, and this volume just really helps build those people. I do wish, however, that they did a little bit more with Knuckle Duster. I have a feeling that they will do. I've seen the cover art for the next couple of volumes, and there is a one where it looks like he is going to get a little bit more time to shine. And I really hope that is the case, because whilst I do love the character, he's probably my most favourite of the three of them, I do feel that there needs to be something more to him, because regrettably at times he just feels like too much of a cartoon character for a story like this. one of the things I really do love about My Hero Academia is just how character driven it is. I know some people might find that silly to say because, you know, to them it's just some knockabout fun, and that's fine if you just see it as being such and you see that as being the case and you're kind of supportive of it. If you're kind of dismissive of it and just see it as stupid anime punchy shouty things, well, maybe you're a bit of a shit, but whatever. But like I say, one of the things I really do like is just how everything that happens in this series, whether it's Vigilantes itself or the main series, happens due to our cast. Things happen and are happening because of things that they have done or things that they are doing. And some of the best moments in that series are the moments where we just get a deep dive into these characters, getting to understand what makes them tick, getting under an idea as to what makes them the people that they are today, how they got to that point, whether it's things that they themselves have specifically done, or whether it's things that society has done to them or has not done to them, which has got them into that particular point. Nothing, as far as the characters in that series is concerned, just happens. Life doesn't happen around them. They are an active participant in their life story. And again, most of their issues, their long-term issues, and issues that might well echo long after the big bads in the main series are dealt with, are going to be there, and are going to be things that they will need to deal with, things they'll need to come around to, things they'll always have to struggle with and fight with, which makes them feel like authentic people. When you see them getting into the fights, when you see them get knocked about, sure, in the back of your mind, you know they're going to be okay, because they're the heroes, and the chances of them getting knocked off is kind of slim. But all the same, it does put you on edge because you really like them as people. You like them as individuals. And even if you don't like them, like I'm not a big fan of Endeavour as a person, you still want to learn more about them. You want to see how they grow and how they evolve and how they change over time. Now, I will admit that Vigilantes has lacked that kind of deep connection thus far. At least until this most recent volume where we do get more of a deep dive into it. Though I will admit that I'm not holding that against Vigilantes, because let's be honest, if this were an anime, and if we were to treat every single episode thus far as being an episode of an anime, we're only about 9 episodes into it. So you can't really compare one that's got nearly 70 episodes to one that's only got 10, and say that the 10 just doesn't have developed characters, when it just simply hasn't had that long. And of course, this isn't even including all the novels and spin-offs and movies that My Hero Academia has had, where they have been able to develop their characters, or at the very least develop a great connection with their audience. With Vigilantes, I hope that this connection, this build-up of the characters continues to grow and develop, as the series itself continues to grow and develop. Because I feel that what is holding back this series, and I'm not going to say this is a negative because quite frankly, it's just, again, we're just so early into it, is I think that to really make these characters tick, we need that extra level of depth to them. We need them rounding off a little bit more, which is why when we have these moments where we get to understand the characters, there's a part of me that's always disappointed when it ends, because it's a case of, oh, it feels like we're finally turning the corner, we're finally getting an understanding of them, we're going to finally understand really what makes Pop Step tick, and then it stops. And again, that's not a negative, because we're only about 9 episodes into this, and we've got another 40 or 50 left to go, so yeah, we're going to get that development, but all the same, there is still a part of me that does wish we get a little bit more of that. Maybe a few less episodes where the thrust of the narrative isn't just, oh, a guy has taken trigger, we have to stop him, oh, we stopped him, oh, do you want to go get a beer? Okay, and that's it. Maybe a few less of that. Now, one final positive that I have here, and I will admit it probably should have come earlier in the review because I've really not written much about it, but again, forgive me because I'm not really feeling that well at the moment, is just quite simply that I think the artwork in this particular issue is frankly top-notch. Much like the action itself, it's really hard to go into detail when talking about because, and I hate to say it, it just works. There's always just this great sense of personality and energy to everyone that you see, whether they're just some guy in the background or one of our main characters. Everyone has just this brilliant, distinct look to them, with some of the action and some of the sequences and some of the just sequences in general that we see at times getting wonderfully grotesque, and I really like that. Again, not as grotesque as I would have liked at times, but hey ho, that's what reading Judge Dredd when you're way too young to be reading it does to you. God, how did I get away with that? I was only like 4 years old and I was reading it. I really shouldn't have been reading it. Anyway, let us now get into the negatives, and I will be honest with you, dear listener, this is one of those rare instances where when it comes to critiquing a piece of work, my issues aren't really with the content itself, but more so its delivery. More pointedly, I have issues with the editing of this particular volume. Now, to be honest and to be blunt, yes, the editors do have their hands tied as far as how much editing they can actually do with the particular manga itself. The speech bubbles are hard-coded into the artwork, so yeah, there are going to be moments where the text just kind of awkwardly sits in it, and it doesn't really fit in it as it properly should do. There are moments where, to be honest, I think that the artwork looks a little bit too murky, but that's due to just the print paper that it's printed on. Like, ideally, this would be one of those big, nice, white paper omnibus looking things that my Judge Dredd omnibus is coming. Sadly, that isn't the case, and that's just by the by. The editors don't really have a control over this stuff, so I can't really hold that against them. But something that I can hold against them, even though I'm reluctant to use that phrase, is just how inconsistent and how shoddy some of the editing can be. Mostly the big issue that I have comes with the translations and just how inconsistent they can end up being. Sometimes they'll just airbrush over the Japanese text and just write what it should say in English with the first font that they can seemingly find and just leave it as is. This is typically done in certain background shots. You'll see a side of a van will have text on it. You'll see a business card will have English text on it. And it looks rather sloppy because it's not particularly interesting text. It's literally like, well, what have we got? Well, my Word document says Times New Roman, so let's just use that, regardless of how stylistically interesting or not it particularly is. Other times they won't go so far as to airbrush over a particular scene, they'll just include a translation as to what that particular thing says in the margins. But sadly it's for stuff that is incredibly incidental, stuff that doesn't really have deeper meaning or subtext, and I say that without being flippant. Like, if there was a Japanese equivalent of Neville Chamberlain's Peace in Our Time speech, and a character said that or a company had that as their name, you'd know something bad was going to go down. Granted, you'd only know that if they had a translation of that, either in the margins or with it being airbrushed over. Here that isn't the case. Whenever they include the marginal translations, it's for stuff that thus far has been pretty incidental and not important. Certainly not so important that they'd airbrush over it and use the first font that they could find. And there are other times where the text just isn't translated at all, which is understandable when it's something incidental, when it's the name of a shop or the brand on the side of a beer bottle or whatever. I get that is fine. Granted, it kind of feels a little bit weird that you wouldn't go to that extent for certain things but others, but again, whatever. But there are other times when they won't translate it at all, but they'll just include the English pronunciation of that particular Japanese phrase in the speech bubble and almost treat it like it's a common turn of phrase in the English language. Whilst I could understand that if them doing that, if that particular word was more common or more understood, they do that because quite simply we'd understand it. Or because, there's no short translation of what that phrase actually means. But with the absence of a translation, those particular moments, those particular words just look rather odd. And yes, I'm coming back to the Senpai thing from a few episodes ago. Like, there's no translation as to what that word means for anyone who isn't familiar with it. They just include it in the text like it's a common turn of phrase. It reminds me of the phrase Schadenfreude, not Senpai itself, and this scenario doesn't make me remind me of the phrase Schadenfreude, but how that word is used. Schadenfreude is a German word which means to derive pleasure from someone else's suffering. Over the years, that has become a semi-common phrase in English-speaking countries. But even so, it's not so common that you can get away with using it without there being some kind of translation in the media itself. With a character going, oh, that's that word that means to get enjoyment from other people's suffering. Or a character going, oh, there's a word for this, it's Schadenfreude, it means da-da-da-da-da. You get the idea. Senpai is not a common word or a semi-common word in the English language. In time, that might well change. It might become the next Schadenfreude and be one that's used in normal conversation. I know that it's well known in anime and fan circles, but to your average Joe or Jane reading this for the first time without that translation, it just kind of stands out as odd. Particularly when you bear in mind we are already reading a translation of Japanese text. So you've got a Japanese translation of Japanese text that doesn't always translate the Japanese text. And when it does, it usually does it in a rather sloppy way. It's really weird. Like, there's no other words for it. Either airbrushing over it, using any given font, whether or not it looks good or not, or whether it actually needs translating in that way at all, or they're putting it in the margins, but translating words and phrases that don't need to be translated, and the one time that they actually do need to translate something, they don't bother. It's really weird. Okay, stuff like this, releases like this, are aimed more at a particular demographic, one that I'm barely in to begin with. So anyone else, they can understand it. For someone like me that's new to it, what the hell? Why are you doing it like this? Another issue that I have, and I'll try not to spend too long to this because I am looking at the runtime right now, but is the fact that I really am getting fucking sick of those little insert shots that we get in panels. You know, the ones where it has the little head in the corner, little cartoon head that says, he learnt it from this guy, or he told them. Now, the first time that popped in, that was kind of cute, if redundant, because it was a moment where you could kind of guess, yeah, he probably learnt that from him anyway. It just happened off camera, and it was so incidental that it didn't need pointing out. But the fact you've now pointed it out makes me wonder whether or not this actually is a plot hole or not. And it ends up drawing attention to something that really didn't need attention drawing to it. And oftentimes it's covering stuff that could have been covered in a line of dialogue or left up to the audience's interpretation or presumption. Sometimes, or at least was the case an episode or two ago, it was saying stuff that was factually inaccurate, which would have misled the audience had they not read it themselves a week or so prior to it. And maybe, just maybe, in a hypothetical anime adaptation, those insert shots won't be there, and we'll just see the character learning these things anyway. Or at the very least, if they are added in, they'll be done with a little bit more visual flair. Hell, I'd take a flashback sequence, just a quirky little thing, maybe do it in a kind of flippant, like, jokey way, where it's just a case of, oh yeah, that guy's that guy. Okay, thanks. Bing! Back. There we go. Fine. Here it just kind of feels a little bit slapdash. It draws attention to stuff that didn't need attention drawing to it because you kind of just accepted it as being a fact. And worse, it makes you wonder if there's many plot holes in this that might not actually be there. And at times it just kind of looks slightly unprofessional. Like they didn't proofread the script ahead of time and then realise, oh crap, we missed something. Oh well, just put a thing in here now to explain it. Not a scene, just an insert shot, a little bubble that just explains it. Like, I know that certain Marvel and DC comics in it, but it was a case of you'd have a little asterisk and it'd say, this is reference to Spider-Man issue 289 or Detective Comics 37 or whatever, and then you just go from there. Here, that isn't the case. It feels really weird to me. But anyway, in the overview, I have to say that, again, this volume was great. There's a lot of really wonderful things within it. Whilst I have had issues with individual episodes as a whole, it really isn't enough to condemn the volume as a whole with. I really did enjoy it. My only real issue of complaint is the inconsistent translations, and those weird little insert shots are starting to irritate me more than they are entertain me. But as a whole entity, it's great, fantastic, good. I really like the way this is all going, and I want to see how this grows in the next few weeks. With that said and done, let us get into Comment Corner! Okay, now it is time for Comment Corner. Our first comment comes from Big X1, who says, this was a great episode. I can't wait to see the fight animated. Thank you for your comment, and personally I agree. I want to see this fight animated in some form. Though with that said, I really don't know how you do the fight from last week in an episode. Like, it just happens in such a quick, short snap that you can't build an episode around it. Like, last week's episode would be the end of season finale episode. They'd add a few more filler episodes in it, make it a 10, or maybe, if you really want to stretch it out, a 20 episode season. And you have that as your big final fight, or your mid-season break fight. But the problem is it happens so quickly that you can't really get invested in it. Like, that particular fight would be its own episode, so how the fuck are you going to manage that? Like, maybe you take the flashback you have a few weeks earlier and then have that as part of it, but I don't know how you do that. But anyway, that's for people who are far more articulate and learned on that particular stuff to get their way around it. Our next comment comes from Gobo, my good friend Gobo, who says, they live in a society, Chris, which of course referring to Stendal's philosophy, life philosophy, and how that has evolved and grown from blunt force trauma. Wow, that particular episode is gonna get so much hate when it comes out. Like, for people that aren't aware, because I do know that I have friends and people that I know who watch my reviews who aren't particularly fans of My Hero Academia, but guys, you really don't understand. This guy, there's a lot of people out there who really love Stain, and they think that they're the best thing, and they genuinely think that when it comes to the problems of this particular world, he is as right as rain. He understands it. He's got the solutions. Oh boy, are they going to be pissed off when they find out his entire life philosophy is based around a punch to the face and a misunderstanding. Oh, but anyway, we're going vastly over time. I'd like to just say thank you all for everyone who's been watching and listening thus far, everyone who's liked and subscribed up until this point. Again, sorry if this has gone a little bit rambly, sorry if this is going to be a little bit weird. I've not been feeling well, and the medication's now starting to kick in. So I'll just say thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!